and we'll get started. So what I want to talk about today are these three topics, these three really big questions. So one is, why is it important to save for the future? And then, how much should I be saving for the future and when should I start? And then, how do I develop a savings plan for my future retirement? So we're actually going to start with a quick quiz. And if you look in the polls section, let's see. Yeah, if you look in the polls, I'm going to launch a quick poll for you. And so the question is, what percentage of your salary, including employer contributions, should you save for retirement? So you can just click on the answer that you believe is correct. So 5%, 10%, 15, 20, 25. So let's see, 67% of you have voted. Give you another couple of seconds, 78%. So what percentage of your salary should you save for retirement? %89%. So maybe that's close enough. So it looks like, according to our poll results, 63% of you think that the answer is 15%. That is the most popular answer, and I would say that you all are correct. The old rule of thumb was to save 10%. But now, because over time those traditional pensions have started to disappear, and so when that happens, that means that we as workers are more and more responsible for financing our own retirement, and that includes health care. So the new estimate is actually 15%, so it's a little bit higher. Let me ask you my next question. Okay. Assuming you intend to retire at age 65, how much should you try to save? And so if you look at the poll, I'm asking this as a multiple of your salary. So assuming you intend to retire at age 65, how much should you try to save as a multiple of your salary? 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5, or 6 times your salary? Oh, well, I messed this up. I didn't give you the right poll choices. This was supposed to be, all these answers are wrong, so forgive me. Um, the right answer is actually 10 times your salaries. I'm going to close that poll. I apologize for that one. So the question was, as a multiple of your salary, assuming you intend to retire at age 65, how much should you try to save? And the correct answer is actually that you should try to save 10 times your final annual salary. I don't know where I got 2 to 6 times. But you should try to save 10 times your final annual salary so that when you take your savings and add it to your Social Security benefits, that you would be able to replace about 85% of your pre-retirement income. And so, that number, that 85%, is really crucial when you start doing your retirement planning, because one of the first things that you have to ask yourself is, what kind of a lifestyle do I want to have in retirement relative to what I have now? So how much money do I need to have coming in on a regular basis compared to what I have now? And so the recommendation is 85%. And so to get to 85% of your pre-retirement income, it takes about 10 times your final annual salary. Let me try one more, see if I can get this one right. Last question. If you are within 10 years of retirement and your nest egg isn't sufficient, so this one's a little bit more open-ended, what should you do? So if you are within 10 years of retirement and your nest egg is not sufficient, what should you do? So the poll is now open. So now you've lost all confidence in my polls. No one's voting anymore. Can't see the poll? Let me see. Whoops. Oh, some reason the poll closed before you got a chance to vote. Well, that's okay. This one was a little bit more open-ended. So the idea is, if you're 10 years out from retirement, if you're 10 years out from retirement and you realize that you don't have enough to get to that 85%, then you don't despair and kind of throw out, what is the saying? You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You either save more, because you've got 10 years. And so time value of money maybe isn't working in your favor as much anymore, but you just increase your retirement contributions. Or you're going to have to plan to work a little bit longer if you want to continue to contribute at the level that you're currently contributing, or you just do some combination. So the whole point was just to say that if you're not where you want to be 10 years out, that doesn't mean that you can't get there. So now let's move on. So we've kind of gotten that kind of baseline of what things we need to be thinking about, where your thinking is, and where I need you to get to in terms of how much you should be setting aside for retirement, and what to do and how to get there. So let's start digging into the details. If you're feeling like, oh my goodness, I didn't have the right answers, or oh my goodness, I'm not where I need to be right now, that's okay. If you're a little bit confused, a little bit worried, that's okay, because you've got time and there's lots of folks who can help you figure it out, and you're not alone. Many people are worried about their future and about retirement. In fact, the typical American family really only has a few $1,000s saved for retirement. So when we talk about having 85%, that's certainly the goal, but there are a whole lot of people who haven't met that goal, and so they may not realize their ideal retirement circumstances. In fact, in July 2013, there was an estimate that 38 million working age households didn't have anything saved for retirement. And in fact, recently we were looking at the 2015 financial capability study results, and specifically in Alabama, which was my focus, we found that retirement is one of the top 3 issues for Alabamians, and that's not very different from the country as a whole, in that we either don't have enough saved, we don't have enough retirement options available to us, and so we're just generally not as prepared as we would like to be. So catching up is difficult, and it's really not the money that's a problem, it's the time. If we're in our 50s and we're just starting to really seriously think about retirement, then that tends to be the problem That's the biggest problem, is our time deficit. So if you're at that pre-retirement stage, there is still time to start figuring out what you're going to do.
Financial wisdom from an ex-president who doesn't appear on U.S. currency.
Oops.
I get zero credit for this, but I actually invented Casual Friday. Of course, I called it Less Formal Friday, but it was basically the same thing. For instance, this is how I would dress Monday through Thursday. And this is how I would dress on Friday. So much more comfortable. Why save now? Planning for retirement is important at any age. I know it can seem like a lifetime away in your 20s and 30s, but the sooner you begin saving for retirement, the more likely it is that you'll have quite the dandy of a nest egg for years of worry-free retirement. Forming good budgeting and savings habits now is the first step to financial security later. So, how much should you save? As much as you can is the best answer. Savings plans depend on personal needs, of course, but a good rule is to first establish your retirement goals. Regions has a number of retirement calculators on their website to help you with that. Oh, time to get dressed for supper. Done.
So the key points from that video are that we've got these three factors that we need to think about when we're saving for retirement. Number one is inflation. Well, I guess I shouldn't say number 1, 2, and 3, but because they're not necessarily in any particular order. But one of those factors is inflation. So how much, what will be our purchasing power for our retirement savings at the time that we actually need it? And then tax incentives. Do we have any tax advantaged savings opportunities available to us? And we need to make sure that we utilize those. And then the time value of our savings. So I talked a minute ago already about the importance of time, and that time is really the biggest factor that we need to take advantage of when it comes to retirement, because that's a very long-term savings goal. So now we've taken all the color away from the slide, and it's all dark and gloomy. But the idea here is that most of us are familiar with unexpected events that can be expensive. So I just want you to be thinking about those unexpected events that maybe have already happened to you or happened to people that you know, that get in the way of all of our good intentions when it comes to saving, especially when it's saving for something so long-term like retirement. For example, there are things like family emergencies and deaths in the family, whether it's just the travel related to being with family or any other financial needs or issues that come up, job loss or a reduction in income. That kind of cuts into our ability to save. Major illness, healthcare emergencies, you know, in Alabama again in particular, but nationwide, medical bills are a huge expense that derails us from reaching our financial goals. Major car repairs, major appliance repairs, home repairs. You know, so you get the idea. But saving is our insurance policy, basically, against these unexpected events. And so your savings may be one unexpected event away from being wiped out. So in order to plan for the unexpected, we've got to have an emergency fund. In fact, on Saturday, that's my topic, is emergency funds, and, you know, spending a little bit more time on this importance of saving in general. So these emergency funds make it easier for us to handle these large expenses when they come up. So then if we've got an emergency fund for these, not so much day-to-day, but these things that could come up any day in the short term, then that leaves us to not have to touch our long-term savings, and it keeps our retirement funds invested and working in our favor. So I tend not to have a lot of pushback when I'm talking about retirement savings, but oftentimes when I'm talking about saving in general, particularly to younger folks, they're saying, oh, this sounds great, but I don't really have any money to save. And so a lot of people just think it's hard to save, or it's really easy not to save. They say that they don't have enough money. They'll save later when kind of things change, their financial situation gets a little bit more stable. They make more money, they have less expenses, and for whatever reason, we've got lots of excuses, and we put it off and we put it off and put it off. And then it goes back to what I was saying a minute ago. We lose track of time, and time isn't working in our favor anymore because we kept putting it off. So you're better off saving a small amount early than not doing anything and waiting till later, and then you have to put that huge amount of savings in to get caught up. So just to kind of put it in perspective and show in general what a typical consumer looks like and what they're facing and how they're saving, here are some facts about today's kind of average consumer. So looking at these gauges, we see that only 31% have a plan for their finances. You know, you kind of just take it paycheck to paycheck, or you figure, you know, I'm paying my bills on time and that's all that matters. But they're not really thinking ahead. So only 31% of people have a plan for their finances. 63% have an emergency fund, so that's pretty good. But 38% are still living paycheck to paycheck. So again, not having a plan for your finances doesn't mean that you're living paycheck to paycheck, but it could mean that. And then 41% just feel like they're behind on their financial plans. And typically it's because of retirement, that they're not really thinking about their long-term future. And they feel like they need to be doing a better job. So when you think about it this way, and looking at all these gauges, it's really no wonder that some people are frustrated about saving. It's like kind of being behind, you can't catch up, and sometimes you feel like you're even falling even farther behind. And that's how I feel today. But tomorrow or next week, it could be even worse. And so it gets a little bit frightening. So what we need to do, and that's why I'm excited about this series of webinars that we're doing, and we'll do more, we need to start changing people's thinking about saving in the short term and in the long term. And so we've got to figure out a way to kind of get ahead of the thinking, of getting ahead on saving money. So some ways you can probably think of your own ideas on how to get ahead, but some possibilities are cutting out the credit cards, cutting out debt. Credit cards are great for convenience, but so many people use revolving credit, and that's what we've got to start thinking about, is if we can't pay the balance in full at the end of each month, then we don't need to be using it, because that's taking away from our ability to save. Building that emergency fund has to be a priority, and if that emergency fund is insufficient, then adding to it has to be a priority. And then sometimes we can save money by not spending money frivolously, and one huge frivolous source of, or way that we spend money sometimes, is on late fees, over the limit fees. And all of that comes from, you know, not having a plan, not really thinking about overall how I'm managing my money, just down to, do I have a plan for how I pay my bills? And so those fees add up. So, you know, and related to that is just getting ahead on bills. You know, sometimes it's like the same kind of thing as filling up your gas tank when you're half full instead of waiting till the light comes on. You know, it's better to go ahead and pay the bills and think about how you're going to do it ahead of time instead of when someone's calling you because you're late, or, oh my gosh, I haven't paid bills this month. Just getting ahead and having a routine and having a plan. So saving for the future is important for all of those reasons and then some. So what our theme, one of our themes this week has been this notion of paying yourself first. Paying yourself first is really the secret to saving money. It's really a tried and true way to keep money aside before you pay your expenses. So when you're putting that money, that budget together, paying yourself first, your emergency fund savings, your retirement savings come out first, then everything else comes in. And that's a really important message to younger people before they start creating all these bills that might be so much that you just don't have a whole lot available to save. So it takes a little bit of discipline and time, but that's what it takes to have that secure retirement that we all want. So it's about saving and creating a habit. So I know in some ways we're kind of veering away from talking about retirement, but it all fits together, because when we're thinking about saving and our finances, one of the best ways to think about it is like the way Stephen Covey says in the 7 Habits in his 7 Habits series, really, is you begin with the end in mind. So you think about, what kind of life do I want to have when I retire? What kind of life do I want to have 5 years from now? What kind of life do I want to have this year? And then you kind of work your way backwards and think about, well, what do I have to do to make that a reality? So the more time I spend planning and saving, the easier it's going to be to make all those things happen. So if you look on the materials tab of your control panel, you should see a handout. There's actually 2 handouts. One is the America Saves Pledge, but the other one is the retirement handout. So you can download that and print it out. And on one part of that handout, they talk about setting financial goals. And so as we're talking in these next couple of slides about setting financial goals, if something comes to mind about a goal that you have in these different time frames, go ahead and jot it down, especially if you have the ability to print out the handout, because I think they're PDF, so you won't be able to type on them. But jot it down and maybe later on add it to the handout once you get a chance to print it out. But let's start with short-term goals. So think about, what are some of your short-term goals? For example, when we're thinking about short-term in accounting and finance, that's always things that are going to happen in the next year or this calendar year, but it's in that 1 year time frame. So some things might be paying off your credit card debt, starting a savings plan, setting aside enough money in your emergency fund to cover, well, 3 months of expenses would be ideal. Checking up on your insurance coverage and making sure your life insurance policies are adequate. So those are some examples of some short-term goals. So think about what goals in the short term would be appropriate for you. Then medium-term goals. So medium-term would be in that maybe 1 to 5 year range. So these are ones that you need to reach soon or right away, and they're going to help you on that journey from where you are today to where you envisioned yourself when you retire. So what are some of your medium-term goals? What things can you envision happening in the coming years that would put you on track for that future that you want to have in retirement? So jot those down as you think about them. You know, I think about my own family, and we've got a middle schooler, 2 in high school, and 1 in college. So for us, our major focus, handouts should be in the materials tab. let me know if anyone else is having trouble finding the handouts. But in our household, our major focus is getting these kids through college and trying to support them as best we can. So that could be a medium-term goal, just, to kind of depending on the stage that your family is in. Maybe it's also diversifying your investments for folks who work in the corporate world. Oftentimes we have a lot of our money invested with our company through 401k or something like that. Maybe it's time to think about diversifying. Maybe also, as we're getting closer to retirement, that catch up. Did we let time get away from us? Do we need to look at what our contributions are and see how we can get on track? Can't find the materials tab. So the materials, the trouble is I don't know what it looks like for you. For me, I have a little place that looks like this, and it says materials, and there's two attachments. But if you send me a note in the chat for anybody who can't get to them, I could just email those to you afterwards. So at any rate, those are some examples of medium-term goals. And then next, of course, they're long-term goals. So this is in that retirement. Okay. So I apologize that y'all can't see the material, so I'll make sure I get these handouts to you. But so the last thing is retirement, or long-term goals. So that's where retirement fits in. So what goals do you have for that time of your life? So again, when you get the handout, you want to jot these things down. And so these are things that you're dreaming about today. You're dreaming about what life would look like later on. Oh, okay. So they may be things like that, purchasing that vacation home, retirement property, maybe buying the RV, and like my husband and I joke about going to all the SEC football games in the RV. The big one for us right now is just figuring out when we'll retire, because we both have different work histories, and so he's eligible to retire with full benefits a lot earlier than I am, so figuring out how to coordinate that. And then, what kind of standard of living do we want to have when we retire? So again, in our family, we're trying to figure out when we will retire, and we really want to have our house paid off by then. And so we kind of go back and forth about, can we afford to make the contributions on our mortgage to retire when we want to, or do we have to push out that retirement date? But again, think about what retirement means for you. So in order to reach your goals and have that retirement that you're dreaming of, you've got to start saving the money. So to do that, you've got to understand the options that are available to you, and so that's what we're going to talk about next. So I didn't do a poll for this, and maybe that was a good thing. So you can use the chat box if you want to participate in this. We'll kind of play a little game. So I'm going to call out the features of different savings products, because I want to make sure that you're clear on what savings vehicles are available to you for saving for retirement. So I'm going to call out the features of the products, and then I want you to put in the chat which of the products on the screen I'm talking about. So your choices are certificate of deposit, money market account, or savings account. Okay, so I'm going to give you the features. You type in which product I'm talking about. So first up, I'm thinking of a product in which you leave your money for a set period of time, like maybe 6 months or a year. You have limited deposits or withdrawals. you earn, yes, Mr. Wyndham is correct. So I'm talking about a certificate of deposit. You earn a higher interest rate the longer you keep your money invested in the CD, and you're going to have to pay a fee if you withdraw your money before the term has ended. Okay, now you're down to two choices. Either the money market account or the savings account. So I'm thinking of a product that requires a higher minimum balance to earn interest typically. And it pays a, okay, Debbie Woods, you are correct. The answer is a money market account. It pays a higher interest rate for higher balances. It does not have a fixed term like the certificate of deposit, and it allows you to make deposits and withdrawals. So that's the money market account. So the difference between the CD and the others is that you have a specific term and you pay penalties for early withdrawals. And the difference between the money market and the savings account is that you typically have a higher minimum balance and possibly opening balance as well for the money market account, but you earn a higher interest rate. Okay, so I'm going to move from savings into investment. Savings a little bit more short-term, investment is more long-term. The 85% again, so the 85% is what should be your goal for how much of your pre-retirement income you're going to have in retirement. So that helps you figure out how much you have to save. So if you're making $10,000 a year, 85% is $8,500. So that's how much you should be trying to live on in retirement, and then you can figure out from there how much you have to save in order to have that much money every year in retirement. So an investment is a savings option that lets you purchase for the future. So a lot of banks now sell investment products like mutual funds, but they're not the same as the deposit accounts we were just talking about, the money market and the savings account. Because if it's an investment account, then you don't have that FDIC insurance. So it's a little bit more risky depending on exactly where and how you invest. So if you invest money, that means you've got a greater risk of losing it than if you put your money in a savings account or some other type of deposit account, like just a checking account. So you could even lose the entire amount if your investment doesn't go well. On the other hand, your investment could earn you more than if you put it in a savings account, because if you take on more risk, then you have the potential to get a higher return. So generally, that's this risk and return trade-off. The higher the risk, the higher the expected rate of return on our investment. So you can make money on your investments by selling them for more than you paid for them. So if I buy a stock, I want to buy low and sell it high. When I buy anything, any type of investment, my goal is to buy low and sell high. So the money that I get when I sell is my income, and I might have to pay taxes on that income, because just because it's not income that I get from working, it's still income and it's still potentially taxable. So you want to start thinking about how much risk are you willing to take on when you're trying to grow your money to meet your retirement needs. And so that's going to be an individual decision. I may be willing to take on more risk than you, or the other way around. So now, just like we were looking at savings, let's look at some strategies that could help you choose the best investment for you. So in case of an emergency or sudden illness or job loss, you still want to be able to support yourself and your family or anyone else who depends on you. So before you do any investing, and this is a key point that I always try to stress to people when I start talking about investing, you got to make sure that you've got a savings cushion that's going to allow you to pay your bills and expenses. That's that emergency fund. So any money that you have saved beyond the cushion is what you have available for investing. So you should try to learn as much as you can about the investments before you plunk your money into them. Remember that just because they did well in the past doesn't mean they're going to necessarily do well in the future, or the other way around. And you want to consider how long you have for your investments. So if you're very close to retirement, you probably don't want to take on as much risk as if you were, 20 or 30 years old and you've got a much longer horizon. Also, you want to diversify. So you should have a mix of investments so that you don't have, as we say, all of your eggs in one basket. And then occasionally you want to review your portfolio and reevaluate, does it still make sense for me to have all of this XYZ stock? Or does it still make sense for me to own all these bonds? So your ideal portfolio is going to change as you age and as you get closer and closer to retirement. Most of us prefer to take on less and less risk as we get closer to retirement. So if we have that kind of traditional portfolio of maybe stocks and bonds, or even stock and bond mutual funds, we want to move closer to all bonds as we get older because that's less risky. So just like we were kind of doing name that savings product, let's play the game again for investments. So let's see if my folks that were so quick with the answers can repeat that performance with investments. So I've got 5 products on the screen. Mutual funds, stocks, treasury securities, savings bonds, and then just this kind of general category of retirement investments. So first, this is kind of like Jeopardy, right? So I'm giving you the answer and you've got to tell me the question. When you buy this investment product, you are loaning money to a corporation or to the government for a certain period of time. Which one of these products is that? That is correct. Those are bonds. So with a bond, it's really an IOU. You're lending money to the government or you're lending money to the company for a certain period of time. Next one. When you buy this product, you own a part of a company, and your ownership certificate or your ownership is called a share. And if the company does well, so you guys know this one. So if the company does well, you might receive dividends, and that's how they give part of the profits back to you. So yes, those are stocks. Next one. When you buy this product, you are loaning money to the government. So you can select from several products based on their face value and their maturity. Yes. If it's the government, then those are my U.S. Treasury securities, especially if I said that I've got different choices. When you buy this product, you invest money over a long period of time so that you will have money to live on when you are no longer working. Yes. Ashton Sapp. These are the retirement investments. And then the last one, when you buy this product, you invest in many investment products. Exactly. Those are mutual funds. So mutual funds, you're not necessarily just buying one stock, you're buying some group of stocks that a portfolio manager has picked. So stocks, mutual funds, and some of these retirement investments pose a greater risk than bonds, as we just talked about. Greater risk than bonds and actually the treasury securities. But more risk, more return. So bonds and U.S. treasuries have less risk, but in return, they're going to give you that lower amount of earnings. So now, in addition to deciding how you should invest your money, You should also be mindful and really actively address your other financial choices that may undermine your long-term goals. So we talked about that in the beginning, that we've got to be careful with the credit card debt and the unnecessary spending so that we're not derailed from our retirement plans. So are you putting off saving until tomorrow? We talked about that as well. Do you spend too much? Are you paying a lot in interest? So to help you reach retirement at the age that you've identified and have that lifestyle that you're envisioning, you want to keep in mind these strategies that I've got on the screen now. You want to start saving as soon as possible. The sooner you start, the longer your money has to grow. You want to try to reduce or eliminate your debt because debt reduces your saving power. You want to cut back on your unnecessary expenses, especially if you need to go into debt to pay for them. Sometimes we think that that available balance on our credit card is an extension of our budget, but it's not. So avoid debt that does not help build long-term financial security. So that means loans to go on vacation or loans to buy clothes or go out to fancy dinners. And then the last one, the last key here is pay off most or all of your credit card balances and your personal loans if you can. You should pay off your high-interest credit cards as soon as you can, but keep making monthly payments to yourself once you've paid it off. So don't pay off those credit card balances and then start blowing that money every month. At least some of that money that you're not sending to the credit card company, that's money that you could be saving. So now let's get into some nitty-gritty details. You know, the guy had the briefcase with all these different retirement investments. Let's talk about what's in the briefcase. IRAs. IRAs are individual retirement accounts, and they're kind of the most basic type of retirement arrangement. You deposit money into an account, which could go into a combination of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or treasury securities that we just talked about. So there's two main types, two flavors if you want to call it that. There's the traditional and there's the Roth. And they can be established at a bank, an insurance company, a brokerage company, but the difference is how they're taxed. So do you put the money in before taxes or after taxes, and then do you pay tax when you get them out? So you want to think about when do you want to pay tax? Because we always have to pay tax on our income, but would we rather pay the tax on the income now and then invest what's left, or do we want to invest our money pre-tax and pay tax on it when we make the withdrawal? So that's the difference for the most part between a traditional and a Roth IRA. There's some other stipulations as well, but I'm not going to get too far into the weeds. Another one here is the 401k. So a 401k plan is a retirement savings plan that's established through your employer, and it lets you set aside a percentage of your pay before taxes. So that means that the taxes that you pay on your income tax could be lower. And so typically you get to choose how you invest that money, and there may be an employer match, and that's really important because if you don't take advantage of the match, you're kind of leaving money on the table. So you should talk to your benefit counselor or an investment professional to help them to get their help in figuring out which of these plans are available to you, what makes sense, and what your contribution level should be. So let's talk about what it means to save for retirement at the different stages of your life, because it's important for you to understand that at these different phases, we're changing over time. And so also on that handout that I'm going to send you afterwards, you'll see that we talk about these different stages. And so, you know, things are different for a 20-year-old versus a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old. So let's start with the 20-year-old. Assume that you're 20-something And maybe you're in college, or maybe you can think back to that time. You're in college or starting your first career, and you want to think about what are the factors that make it easier for that 20-something person to save, and what makes it more challenging. So that's what we're showing on the screen. At that stage, they're trying to establish their home or household, to purchase a home, establish credit, buy a car. So those are the things that a 20-year-old is focusing on. But it's important for them to start saving as soon as they start working. Bump up that 401k. I heard this tip the other day. If you can't put the max into it, add to it by about 1% a year if you can. If you don't have a 401k or a 403b or 457 or one of those tax advantage retirement plans available to you at work, then that's when you want to check out the IRA. So just remember that you want to get time on your side. So set a goal and get started. So in the family and career stage, and this is about 30s and 40s, you're more established in your job, you're raising a family, maybe thinking more about the future, and so the things that a 30 or 40 something is doing is maybe replacing that first home, going on family vacations, saving for college, and again, thinking more about retirement. So what they need to be doing, so if you're in that group, revisit your retirement goal and the plan that you have in place to reach it. If you're changing jobs, I get this question all the time, what do I do with my 401k? Don't cash it out. It's so tempting. But look at what your rollover options are. Maybe you roll it over to a new 401k at your new job, or maybe you roll it over into an IRA. Continue to increase those retirement contributions. So again, maybe 1% a year until you get where you want to be. Some people say, well, every penny that I have coming in is budgeted. Well, don't budget the raises. When you get a raise, roll that raise over into your retirement. Let's look at the next phase. So people in their 50s, now we're getting to that, well, I'm only 10 or 15 years out from retirement. What do I do? Well, at this point, you're kind of nearing the end of your career, and you may be supporting older children or maybe even parents. So what's going on there is you're thinking about, I want to get this mortgage paid off, so I'm not making mortgage payments on that 85% of my pre-retirement income. I want to make sure that my retirement number is right. I want to do some things for my kids. So consider that in the year that you turn 50, now you're allowed to start making catch-up contributions, because as we said in the beginning, there are a whole lot of people who just haven't saved enough for retirement. And so now we're allowed to make catch-up contributions, which just means that once you turn 50, you're allowed to put more into your retirement accounts than you were able to when you were younger, and still get the tax benefit. So start looking at your nest egg and think about when you can retire and how long your money's going to last based on how long you expect to live in retirement. And then again, think about rebalancing your accounts and make sure you're not taking on too much risk. So in retirement then, you're working less, you're involved in other activities like volunteering or traveling or things like that. And so you want to think about what that stage is going to look like for you. How long do you want to be in retirement? What happens now? What changes do you have to make now in order to live that life that you're dreaming about, really? So to get there, it's really important to start thinking about a retirement savings plan. So again, begin with the end in mind. So develop a retirement savings plan. 3 important things that you want to put in that plan. Realistic goals. How much money do I want to have each month in retirement? Identify figure out, so I guess I said it backwards. How much do I want to have each month to live a certain lifestyle? Do you want to travel? Do you want to, put your grandchildren through college? What is it that you want to do when you retire? And then it's a good idea to have a separate account for just emergency savings versus your retirement savings. So there are lots of calculators available to you on the internet to figure out, now that you know what your future, what you want your future to look like, you've got some ideas. We talked about the 85%, so we've got some ideas about how much money you have. Then you can go out on the web and use some of the different calculators that are available and figure out how much do you need to be contributing to your retirement right now to live that life that you're dreaming about. And so you can make some assumptions about how much interest you'll earn, what your taxes are, and so on. So the factors that will kind of go into figuring out what your contribution needs to be are: how much do you have saved already? How many years do you need this money to last? I mean, it's a little bit difficult to think about, but how long do you expect to live after you retire? And what rate of return do you expect to get? And most of these calculators will kind of start you off at some sort of average number. And then what taxes will you have to pay when you take the money out? So I think this is an example here. Let's say that your goal is that you want to save $750,000 and live off of it for 25 years. So if you assume a very modest rate of return of 4.5% and you're taxed at 25%, then your after-tax income is going to be $3,126.55 each month. And so the question is that reasonable? Would $3,126.55 allow you to live the life that you're dreaming? And so that's the purpose of these calculators. And so you can do it the other way around. How much do I have to save in order to have this much money after taxes each month? So if your goal is to retire at 65, and use this same example, you want to have $750,000 when you retire. If you start saving at 50, you're going to have to save $33,000 a year. But if you start at 40, you only have to save $15,000 a year. If you start at 35, it's only 11. If you start at 30, it's only 8, and if you start at 25, it's only $6,500. So you get the point. The earlier you start, and in order to reach a certain goal, the less you have to save each month or each year. So again, I want you to think about putting together a retirement savings plan, and this will be on the handout that I'll send to you if you're not able to access it. And those are the 3 key questions that you want to ask yourself. How much money do you want to accumulate over a certain period of time? How long can you leave it invested? And remember, we talked about risk. How much risk are you willing to take? And that's not like in a number, but are you willing to take on a lot of risk? Yes or no? So think about, so these are just questions to think about as you're putting your action plan together. What are you going to do now to start saving towards those goals? And maybe set little milestones for yourself. What are you going to do by the end of this month? What are you going to do by the end of this year to reach these goals that you're setting for yourself? And so again, on this worksheet, so it's a 2-page handout, there's an action plan. Really give some thought to jotting some notes in that action plan. The top half gives you some space to record the factors for you that are going to affect the steps that you're taking. And then the bottom half gives you some space to put in your action plan. So, you want to be thinking about, if the question is, what can you do by the end of the month? Maybe you say, I'm going to pay off that little annoying credit card bill by the end of next month. And maybe by the end of the year, I'm going to save this much money and I'm going to go put it into maybe a savings bond or open up an IRA or something like that. But you want to have some really specific goals and action plans. So again, in the handout, and make sure that I have your email address so I can get it to you if you're not able to download it. You've got lots of tips and tricks and resources and places for you to jot down the makings of your retirement action plan. So hopefully this has been useful. It went the whole hour this time. Okay, the 85% again. Let me go. I don't think I had it on the screen. I think it was just in my notes. So the idea for the 85% is that when you're thinking about how much money you need to have in retirement, one rule of thumb is you want 85% of your pre-retirement income. That's a reasonable goal for how much income you want to have in retirement. And so you have to have that, it helps to have that as a starting point so you know how much to save. Any other questions for me? So I'm going to write down, before I close the session, I'm going to write down all these email addresses so that I can get the handouts to you. And if there are no other questions, I appreciate you all for coming.